Peter Parker is married and has kids, and now he is also the ultimate Spider-Man.
January in New York. Snow falls from the skies and it blankets the city in white. In his apartment, Peter Parker is struggling out of bed, looking at himself in the mirror. Peter Parker, you're not getting any younger. He sighs quietly, quickly getting dressed and pulling on his wedding ring before heading into the kitchen, greeting his two kids. "You sound tired. Late night?" his son Richard asks. He kisses them both on the head and reaches for a pot of coffee that awaits him. "Thank God for Mom," he whispers. "Thank God for coffee, and I gotta say, Tiger, you look like you need it," Mary Jane says as she walks into the room. The two kiss, and she asks if he's been having trouble sleeping. Peter nods, taking some big gulps of the liquid. He turns back to his briefcase to see May reaching inside, pulling out a shiny silver ball. "Nuh-uh, not a toy, kiddo," Peter says as he takes it away from her. He promises MJ that they'll talk about what's been bothering him later, and he heads out the door to head to work. A short time later, Peter walks through the bullpen of the Daily Bugle. Everyone turns as J. Jonah Jameson comes barging out of his office. "Parker! Parker!" he bellows, but he stops as he passes Peter. "Oh, hey there, Peter. No time for chit-chat," he says with a smile before passing him. "Parker!" he continues to yell, finally stopping in the office of the managing editor of the paper, Ben Parker. "My ears work fine, Jonah. There's no need to yell," Ben says from behind his desk. Jameson smiles at his friend and asks if he needs the 4 o'clock meeting pushed back for his thing. Ben shakes his head, telling him that he should be there without an issue. Peter sticks his head through the door. "Here's your guy," Jonah says. "Hey, Ben, you ready to go?" Peter asks, and Ben nods, pulling on his jacket, and the two of them head for the door with Jonah stopping Peter. "Parker, hold on a second. Where's your tie?" Jonah asks. Peter looks down in shock and mumbles about not even owning a tie, and Jonah waves him off, pulling off his own tie from around his neck, tying it for the young man. Peter glances over Jonah's shoulder to see his retreating uncle. "How do you think he's doing, Jonah?" Peter whispers, and Jonah raises an eyebrow at him. "Have I ever told you about how much we love to sit around and talk about our feelings? Your uncle and I?" Jonah jokes, finishing tying the tie. "If you really want to know how your uncle is doing, you could always just ask," Jonah says as he waves Peter out the door. The two walk through the snowy streets of the city, heading towards the memorial. Peter finally works up the nerve to ask his uncle how he's feeling, pointing out how Ben has only said one word about how he's feeling or doing. Ben glances at him as they're walking, and finally, he speaks. "Peter, you were 15 when your parents had died, and you came to live with May and I. We loved you unconditionally. We protected you. I tried to teach you about the world and prepare you for it, but one thing we never tried to do was replace your parents. Because we couldn't," Ben says, pointing out that Peter's parents died 20 years ago. "It's been a long time, but has one day gone by that you haven't thought about them? Is there one day that doesn't hurt that they're gone?" Peter looks at the ground. "No," he whispers. Ben nods and they continue walking towards the memorial. "Then I think you know exactly how I feel." They finally arrive at the memorial for the Stark attack. May Parker's name is written amongst all the others who lost their lives that day. A blind priest presides over the memorial, speaking about how it is sad that so many lives were lost that day, but those that were taken would want the rest to continue, to remember the good times that they had. Father Murdoch finally steps away, allowing Harry Osborn to speak, who lost both his mother and his father that day. Harry stands before the crowd, agreeing with Father Murdoch, but points out that memories alone aren't enough, that it is wrong that those lives were taken from them. Our future was stolen and exchanged with memories. It's just not enough, and I'm not sure any of us should be expected to live with it, Harry says in closing. Afterwards, Peter stands with his family for a few moments longer, promising MJ that he'll head home right after checking in at the office. Ben and Peter return to the Daily Bugle just in time to see Jonas standing before a board of directors meeting. He throws a handful of newspapers at them and storms out the door. Quit! He shouts, walking past Ben and Peter, staring at them both. But before he leaves, Ben glances at Peter. "Go to your desk, Peter. Keep your head down. We'll catch up later," Ben says before walking into the meeting room and standing before the board. "So, did I miss anything?" he asks quietly. Robbie Robinson looks up from his spot and explains that Jonah was made aware of some editorial restructuring at the paper and wasn't a fan of those changes. but the board is aware of the complaints from advertisers about some of the paper's inflammatory content, and they were uncomfortable with how much the paper has been looking into the Stark terror attack. So we're going to be making some changes on behest of both the board and the broader ownership in general, Robbie tells him. Ben looks at the newest member sitting at the far end of the table, flanked by an eye patch-wearing bodyguard. Jameson's out. Now the paper needs new leadership. You are the obvious choice. It seems you've gotten yourself a promotion, Wilson Fisk says, revealing himself. That's if you want the job, of course. If you can toe the line, he says with a smile. Ben smiles back for a moment before turning and walking out the door. He meets Jonah in the elevator as the old newsman just finished packing his desk. The doors behind them close as they leave the Daily Bugle behind. So what are we gonna do now? Ben asks his old friend. Later, Fisk and his bodyguard are heading towards their waiting car downstairs, and just as Fisk is getting into it, something flies out of the air, blowing up the car. The guard pulls Fisk to safety, looking up in shock to see an armored green goblin fly away on a glider. Close by at the bar with no name, Ben and Jonas sit at the table enjoying a few rounds of beer, deciding that they need to start their own paper. Get back to the roots that they love. We'll do it right. We'll tell the truth, Ben says, and Jonah just laughs, and I'm pointing out that there is no truth in news and no news in truth. How about this? We just promise not to lie. Jonah finally relents, and the pair are joined by Peter, who informs them that Robbie has been put in charge of the paper as of now. His job is still secure. Jonah finishes his beer and leaves the Parkers alone. Peter looks up at Ben and asks him a simple question. Ben, I gotta know, how'd you do it? Peter asks, wanting to know how Ben could so easily leave his job behind. Ben shrugs and explains that he doesn't have a wife and a family to care for anymore, so the choice was easy. Peter nods, looking at the table. What's going on, Peter? Ben asks, and Peter looks up at his uncle, finally admitting what's bothering him, explaining that he feels like something is wrong with his life. Like something is missing. Like he's supposed to be something more and he doesn't know what to do. Ben finally smiles at him and begins to stand, informing his nephew that he can't wait for something to happen, that he needs to take action. I love you, son, but if you're walking around half asleep with your own life, it's time to wake up, he says, patting Pete on the shoulder and heading out of the bar. Later that night, Peter returns home, putting his kids to bed. He comes out to the living room and finds MJ waiting with a bottle of wine. They talk briefly about their day before MJ finally asks Peter what's been bothering him. Peter finally tells her that he needs a change. MJ supports him, pointing out that when she quit her job last year to start her own business, Peter supported her without question. But Peter shakes his head and looks right at her. No, MJ, I think I need to change, he says, and she nods, explaining that she's seen him walk around for years with a cloud over his head. You put on a good face, but you're not satisfied with who you are, she says, putting a hand on his knee. Do you know what you have to do? I think so. Yeah, he says quietly, and she frowns at him. Are things going to change between us? She asks. Never, he says immediately and confidently. She nods, standing, kissing him on the forehead. Well then, that settles it. I'm going to bed and you, go get him, Tiger, she says before walking out of the room. Peter waits for a moment before standing. He reaches into his briefcase, pulling out the silver ball, and he walks to the roof of their building. At the top, the snow is falling on him as he looks at the ball, remembering last night. He was working late in the living room when the energy began to spark on the counter and the strange box appeared. As Peter reached out for it, more energy appeared and an image of Tony Stark was suddenly standing there. Hello. If this has gone as I hoped, I should be speaking to Peter Parker, Tony says. I'm sending you this 6 months in the future. There was an attempt on my and my companions' lives, and we've only had seconds to escape before the orbital platform fired. Tony continues, shocking Peter with his knowledge of the terror attack. Tony continues, explaining that 20 years ago, a man known as the Maker came to their world and began to alter time, to make it so that heroes would never be born. That Peter was supposed to be bitten by a radioactive spider and he was going to gain superpowers. He then set up his own secret cabal and began to quietly control the world. I'm repeating this with others like you, and in 6 months, if I've done this correctly, I will exit this room and find an Earth that has regained its heroes, Tony says. He tells Peter that he was supposed to have a different life. You were supposed to protect the innocent, save lives, inspire citizens of this world to be their best selves. Instead, all of that was taken from you. These people stole your future. These people robbed you of your destiny. The question is, do you want to take it back? Tony finishes. Now back on the rooftop, the windy snow blowing around him, Peter taps the silver ball and it begins to transform in his hand. It reveals a small vial with a radioactive spider inside. I want it, Peter whispers, releasing the spider and allowing it to land gently on his hand. As the sun begins to rise over the buildings, Peter stands ready with a new costume from the silver ball. A new hero. May and Richard look down at a picture from the Daily Planet showcasing this new masked man swinging through the city. Yeah, I don't think it's real, Richard says, shaking his head and explaining to his sister May that it's probably fake. May turns to her father in the kitchen. Dad, Richard says it isn't real. What do you think? She asks Peter, who shrugs from his place of washing dishes and asks her what she thinks. I think this guy is scary and I don't like him, she tells her father, who smiles at his young daughter. Oh, well, in that case, I trust your brother, kiddo. He's pretty smart, Peter tells her. MJ walks into the kitchen, calling goodbye to her family as she heads for the door. But she stops for a moment to stare at her husband. Hey, Peter, have you been working out? And he smiles back. Maybe just a little, he says with a shrug. Later that night, Peter gets his nightly exercise in, swinging through the city, lifting buses over his head and sticking to walls. Since the spider bit him, his body has gone through amazing changes. The only problem being, he's not good at stopping swinging yet. He swings through the air, and after missing his landing, he slams into a water tower. He gets to his feet, shakes himself free of the impact, and muses over the fact that he can take quite a beating now. Could come in handy, he thinks to himself, as he looks out over the city. Meanwhile, Jameson and Ben Parker are enjoying a good steam, talking about how Wilson Fisk is not only hiding indoors, but also keeping these masked vigilante attacks against him quiet while distracting the public with a different costumed character. Jameson nods as he looks at his friend. One is distracting while the other's a story, he muses quietly, and Ben nods, getting to his feet. Time to get to work, he says as he heads for the door. We still need a name, Ben calls over his shoulder, and Jameson sighs, getting to his feet, following his friend. I know, I'm working it out. But Peter is still swinging through the city, flipping through the air, and he finally sticks a landing. I did it! Nice, he whispers to himself, but he's still trying to decide what to do with these new powers. He's always felt like he was destined for something more. But does that mean that he's really supposed to be a hero? As he begins to ponder this, he turns his head. If only there was a sign, he whispers to himself, and he stops as he sees a heavily armored man standing in front of a rooftop entrance to a bank. The man lifts his arms and begins to power up the tech gauntlets that he's wearing. Let me guess, you lost your keys, Peter asks as he suddenly appears next to the guy, startling him. Or are you trying to break into the bank below? Peter continues. The guy turns, looking at Peter's costume, cocking an eyebrow at him. What are you supposed to be? He asks, and Peter laughs, pointing out that he was just asking himself the same existential crisis. And I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be the guy that stops people like you. He finally finishes, and the big man nods, admitting that maybe Peter is right. He's grateful that he stopped him before he could do something wrong. Wait, seriously? Peter asks, mystified, and the big man nods. Yeah, seriously. He holds up a hand, offering to shake Peter's in gratitude. Sure, anytime, mister, Peter says as he takes the heavy gauntlet hand. The big man smiles as the gauntlets charge up. Just call me Shocker, he shouts as he blasts Peter off of the roof, sending him flying into a dumpster far below. Peter lays there in the muck for a moment. Ow, he finally says. A couple of hours later, Peter returns home, still clad in his new black suit. He moves through the shadows, pulling out a carton of ice cream from the freezer, and then sits on the couch with a sigh as the suit pulls away from his mouth. Can't believe I fell for that. Idiot, he says to himself as he takes a bite of ice cream. He then looks up just in time to see his young daughter May standing before him, her eyes wide in shock at the scary man in her house. Tears begin to form as her mouth opens, and she's preparing a scream. But Peter makes the mask fully slide away, revealing his face as he rushes across the room, putting a hand over her mouth. "May, shh, it's me. It's okay. It's Dad," Peter whispers. May looks at her father in shock as he admits to her that he's the scary man. Though he isn't really scary at all, he was just bitten by a special spider that gave him powers. "Oh, you got bit by a magic spider?" May asks in surprise, and Peter pulls his daughter in for a hug. May sniffs at him, pointing out that he smells like garbage. "It's because I was in a dumpster," he tells her as she pulls away, covering her nose. "Mom's gonna be mad," May tells him, and Peter offers her a spot on the couch and the carton of ice cream. "What do you say we wait until her and Richard later? For a little while, this will be our little secret." She sits on the couch and begins to eat happily. "I still don't like your costume," she says between bites, and Peter smiles at her. "Maybe we can do something about that too." But with the next day, with the sun rising over the city, Wilson Fisk is sitting in his office. Captain Britain has joined him for an early meeting, one of the secret leaders of the world holding up the article about the new masked hero, questioning why Fisk would run such a story. "I'm currently under siege by some masked vigilantes. It has been very public and very loud. So I'm giving the people a better story to follow," Fisk explains from behind his desk, but Captain Britain shakes his head, explaining that the way the new America works is that Fisk can only keep what he can control. He needs to get his city in order. "And so you get to play the king, Mr. Fisk. For as long as you can hold on to your kingdom," Britain says, motioning to Bullseye, reminding Fisk to use everything at his disposal. The next night, Peter is sitting atop a statue, high above the city. He's texting Mary Jane, explaining that he's going to be home late from work and not to wait up. And then he smiles down at the pictures of the family that she sends him. That's when he hears a crash nearby and his mask slips back over his face. Peter lands on a nearby rooftop to find Shocker stealing more money. "Hey there! Fancy us running into each other again," Peter tells him, and Shocker hits the roof with a blast, but Peter flips away and webs his face. "Who are you?" Shocker snaps as he rips the webbing away, and Peter rushes in, slamming his fist into Shocker's gut, doubling him over. "Oh, come on. We've covered this already. I'm the guy who stops people like you." Shocker throws up his hands, begging Peter to stop his attack, explaining that his wife is sick and he needs the money to pay for her operation. And Peter looks at him for a simple moment. "Is that true?" he asks, but Shocker's gauntlets have powered up and he smiles. "What do you think?" He blasts Peter again, sending him off the rooftop and into a conveniently placed dumpster. Shocker laughs, leaping away into the night, unaware that he's being watched by the Green Goblin. Shocked by his own misfortune, Peter returns home to find a quiet apartment. On the fridge is a drawing of a red and blue spider that May drew for him. Peter smiles down at it. He still isn't sure if he's cut out for the superhero stuff, but he might give it one more try. MJ and Richard stand at the door of the apartment, staring at Peter and May. "I don't know. I think they're up to something. What do you think, Richard?" she says to her son, and Richard agrees. But the two finally head out the door for a day of shopping after Peter wisecracks back on them. Peter smiles at his young daughter. "You wanna?" he asks with a raised eyebrow. She nods her head vigorously. "Yeah," she says with joy. It's only a short time later that May and Peter are up on the roof, her with her own makeshift costume, and Peter shifting the color scheme of his. "Well, I think it's gotta have a spider on it. It's still kind of scary, Dad," May says as Peter adds a spider symbol and webbing onto his black suit. He shifts it so that he then has a red hoodie over the suit. "Like this? Less scary, more cool?" But May grimaces. "That's not cool, Dad, at all. You're so old," she says, and he shifts through several more designs until he finally settles on red and blue. "Oh, I like it!" his daughter shouts with glee. Peter motions to the city behind them. "You want to take it out for a spin?" It's only moments later that the pair are swinging through the city, with May weeping with joy as she sits on her father's back. Later, Ben and Jonah are staring at their new office, grimacing. "This place is a dump," Jonah comments. "Yeah, but it's our dump," Ben says with a sigh, pointing out that he spent exactly what Jonah allowed him to. Behind them, the door swings open to reveal Peter standing with a potted plant. Wow, this is not great, guys. He says as he walks in, offering them the plant as a warming gift from MJ. She sent it over to liven up the place, and boy, can she pick 'em. Just look at what it does to the room. It's like a whole new dump, he jokes, turning and noticing their news board, where the pair have been tracking the costumed attacks against Wilson Fisk. What is this? Peter asks. But Jonah shakes his head, explaining that since Peter still works for the Daily Bugle, they don't feel comfortable sharing information about a story with him. But Jonah then thinks about it for a moment. I suppose that there could be a quid pro quo situation. We might be able to give you a little information, he says quietly. Peter smiles, asking how can he help. Has there been any chatter over at the Bugle about a guy wearing a green suit waging a personal war on the Fisk organization? Jonah asks point blank. Peter rubs his head and explains that Robbie thinks that there's a story there and has been trying to pursue it, but the other higher-ups at the Fisk organization have been squashing the idea, pushing Robbie to cover up the costumed hero that's been swinging around the city as well. Ben steps forward, motioning to the map, pointing to every place that the green figure has been attacking Fisk. Classic good guy, bad guy situation? Peter asks, and Ben shrugs. Or bad guy, bad guy. After all, it is the real world, not some fairy tale. We shouldn't jump to conclusions, Ben says, staring at the map. And that gives Peter an idea. Later, he stakes out one of Fisk's locations as Spider-Man. He sits for a moment wondering what one is supposed to do to pass time on a stakeout. He realizes that the reason that people eat so much on stakeouts is there's nothing else to do but watch and eat. He messes with his webbing and eventually it starts to rain, so he has to make webbing to hide his head. I hate this, he thinks to himself. More hours pass and Peter finally decides to give it up. And just as he's about to leave, an explosion rocks the building. Peter turns in shock to see a green goblin chasing after a black-clad man with a bullseye on his forehead. Look at you, going after Mr. Fisk, pretending to be a predator, Bullseye jokes, as he leaps into the air, whirling around, throwing a metal playing card that stabs into the goblin's bomb, causing it to explode. The explosion knocks the goblin from his glider, sending him crashing into the rooftop. The goblin snaps as he gets to his feet in his metallic suit. He rolls over, firing a beam from his wrist launcher, but Bullseye dodges it, tossing more playing cards. A killer loose in the world, an actual predator. He laughs as he slams into the goblin, laughing that the goblin thinks that he could do any serious damage by going after Wilson Fisk. I work for the real masters of the world, the real power. I'm paid by the invisible hand to strike down those who forget their station, and I'm good at it. Bullseye raises a card to deal the killing blow, but a web wraps around his hand, and he turns to see Spider-Man watching them from the scaffolding. Now, boys, if you can't play nice, maybe you shouldn't play at all, Spider-Man says, cracking a joke as usual. Bullseye whirls on him as he rips away the webbing. Well, I guess it's my lucky day. I get to eliminate two problems at once, he says as he turns, tossing more playing cards. Spider-Man leaps out of the way, though easily avoiding them. You're gonna have to have better aim than that, Spider-Man tells him. I wasn't aiming at you. He motions to the scaffolding that he just sliced through. Peter turns as the metal begins to twist and warp. It then begins to fall on him, trapping him beneath it. Are you alive? I hope you are, and I hope it hurts real bad, Bullseye says, taunting him as he stalks forward. But that's when the goblin hits him from behind. Bullseye turns, tossing more cards that slice through the goblin armor, bringing a cry of pain from the vigilante. Goblin falls to his knees and Bullseye moves towards him. I'd tell you to make your peace, but that ain't how this is gonna go, Bullseye says, preparing to make the killing blow, but that's when Spider-Man is there, leaping in, punching Bullseye hard and knocking him to the ground. You okay? The Goblin says, and he thanks Spider-Man for his help, calling his glider. Who is this guy? Spidey asks, as Goblin cuffs Bullseye, attaching him to the glider, allowing it to fly away. I don't know yet, the Goblin explains. And he informs Spidey that they can't bring Bullseye to the police since Fisk owns most of the police. So then what are you gonna do? Spidey asks as they watch the glider fly the villain away. Same thing as every day. What needs to be done? The Goblin tells him. Goblin then looks at Peter's suit, tapping a button on his armor. Suddenly there's a voice. Suit pairing enabled. Connecting. The voice calls out as Peter looks around in surprise. He hears the suits connecting and a voice announcing that it's deactivating. What? No! No deactivating! No deactivating! Peter shouts as the mask slides away from his face. He turns in surprise as the goblin's helmet slides away to reveal Harry Osborn. The two stare at each other for a moment before introducing themselves. Well, Peter, I don't know if you've noticed or not, but the world is a strange and dangerous place these days. Do you want to get a drink? You want to talk about it? Harry asks with a smile. Peter stares at him for a moment longer before nodding. Sure, he says quietly. It's April, New York City. Mary Jane and Peter stand at a fancy bar in the city. Are you sure this is a good idea? MJ asks as Peter takes a sip of his drink. He shrugs at her and smiles. At least it gives us an excuse to get out of the house. Dress up a little, he tells her, and she nods agreeing, complimenting him on his attire. But they're interrupted as their dinner guests arrive. There he is. Sorry I'm late, Harry says as he walks up, introducing himself to Mary Jane. Peter has told me all about you. Honestly, he won't shut up about it. The man's obsessed, I think, Harry says with a smile, motioning them to a table and congratulating MJ on the new business that she started. I love it when people bet on themselves, Harry tells them. And Peter points out that Harry said his wife would be joining them. She had a business thing uptown. Here she is now, Harry says as he motions to the blonde woman walking towards them. MJ, Peter, this is my wife, Gwen Stacy. Harry tells them, and Gwen comes forward apologizing for being late, shaking both of their hands. The group sit down at the table, and they begin to enjoy their meal, with MJ and Peter explaining that they haven't actually been out since before the kids. Do you two have any? MJ asks Gwen, but she shakes her head. Children? No. I'd like to think that I'd be a good mom, but none for us yet. We're considering it, though. She explains, and Harry nods, telling them that they decided to hold off on children due to the way the world is. Sure, I get it, MJ says. The conversation then shifts to MJ's new business, and she explains that she started a PR firm after working for several others and not liking to have to spin awful stories for awful clients. I'm on a retainer at Damage Control right now, and last week I started helping out at Peter's uncle, Ben Parker and J. Jonah Jameson's paper. They're starting their own news outfit, she explains, telling the group that they've decided to name the group The Paper. Meanwhile, at Peter Parker's apartment, Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson are watching the kids. Jonah looks up from his spot on the couch. I don't get it. We're doing the news online, not in print. And she wants to call it The Paper? Jonah says, and Ben explains that it's supposed to be ironic and meta. But Jonah still grumbles about it. Finally, May looks up from her place on the floor with her toys. Uncle Ben, is he going to be leaving soon? She says, glaring at Jonah. Back at the restaurant, they moved on to dessert. Harry seems surprised that the old reporters are starting a new news outlet, commenting on the world's news media and how it's a closed system and it's going to be difficult for them. I don't know. Depends on what they cover, how deep they dig, Gwen adds to her husband's comments, pointing out that the stories that the Daily Bugle has been running on the new masked vigilante are a little obtuse and they don't get down to the point of the masked man. They don't explain that he exists for a reason, that there must be a point to him, a purpose, a need that he's fulfilling, good or bad. Gwen says, explaining that his existence implies that there is something wrong with the world, and that could actually upset a lot of people. I can see that you've thought about this quite a bit, Peter notes, and Gwen nods, taking a sip from her wine. People need heroes, Peter. If your uncle's going to report on that, good for him, she says, and the conversation shifts away. MJ and Gwen then decide they're going to the bathroom. There they touch up their makeup, and Gwen apologizes if she's coming on too strong with her opinions. Finally, Gwen asks if MJ can put her in touch with the grumpy old men at the newspaper. Gwen explains that Oscorp needs to spend some of its money, and it's already donated to various charities and other non-profits. I'm kind of in the mood to see if I can launch a pirate ship, she says with a smile. Back at the table, Harry looks up at Peter and points, a small smile on his face. You haven't told her yet, have you? Harry asks, and Peter is shocked. No, wait, you told Gwen? He asks, and Harry nods, sipping his drink, explaining that he's told her everything. Harry, what are you thinking? Peter says in a hushed tone. But Harry explains that Gwen is the love of his life. He doesn't want to keep secrets from her. Are you telling me you haven't told anyone? Peter covers his eyes and sheepishly explains that his daughter knows. Peter says that this is something he wants to keep secret for now. I don't even know for sure if I want to do this, whatever this is, he says. But Harry explains that he has seen Peter in action, that he was meant to do this. It's all on us, pal. Save the world. Harry says, pouring another glass of wine. He explains that he can't tell Peter what to do, that they're fighting against the most powerful people on the planet who secretly run things and want to keep everything as is. It's institutional, it's systematic, and it's the whole damn world, Harry says. But he pauses, looking at Peter before pointing. But you have great power, Peter. And with great power also comes great responsibility. It's a gift, but only if you use it, Harry tells him. Later, Peter and MJ are walking through the city streets, reflecting on their evening. Finally, Peter asks MJ her thoughts on what Gwen was saying. The world needs heroes, MJ, he says, and she smiles at her husband as they continue through the streets. What do I need heroes for, Peter? I've got you, she says, and Peter smiles, putting his arm around her. The past is what makes a man. And for Harry Osborn, that night was like any other. He was running late to a dinner party where he was supposed to meet with his parents, Norman and Emily. But when he called to them to let them know that he was on his way, he looked up into the sky to see a bright light getting bigger and bigger, until it fell and destroyed the building that he was supposed to be in already. In the coming weeks, Harry Osborn and Gwen Stacy were left with all of Norman's assets, including the business that Norman had built from the ground up, Oscorp. However, when speaking with the attorney in regards to the estate, there was something else left with it. A card with a king printed on it. The card belonged to Wilson Fisk, the self-made kingpin of New York, and that card was a call to meet. Harry, not knowing the dealings his father had with Kingpin, met with him unsure of what to expect. He certainly didn't have his father's influence or work ethics. But Kingpin didn't care about that. What he wanted was to get rid of the Stain Stark enterprise that he had acquired with too many eyes looking at it. Harry took the deal and soon learned that the Stark enterprises that he had also just inherited had a secret cache of tech unknown to most. However, that wasn't the biggest secret that he had found. That was when Otto Octavius dug through the records to find a hidden file containing the information on someone named the Maker and the Council. While learning more about the world than anyone ever knew or should know, Harry and Otto got to work turning one of Tony Stark's suits into one of his own. What's more, Otto also learned that Tony was very busy before his passing, reaching out to all of the heroes that could have been. All across the state were signals left by Tony Stark for people explaining that their lives should have been so much different, that he was going to provide the means for them to become their true selves. The night of Peter's second run-in with the Shocker, it was Harry who had been watching from afar, and he wasn't looking over Peter. Once Shocker duped Peter the second time, Harry swooped in, seeing Shocker being one of the people in possession of the tech that Harry wanted back. He asked him where he got it from. The Shocker explained that he was robbing somebody else's apartment, and when he snuck in, he found the owner had recently passed away. There was a projection thing, and that Stark kid was on it. When he arrived at the ending, these gloves were just sitting there. Harry thought about it for a moment, stating that if Tony is sending out all of these messages, it's quite possible Tony Stark is still alive. Shocker tells him that he isn't about to give up the gloves, and he attacks Green Goblin, cracking Harry across the head. But after being struck, Harry looks back, asking him, "Was that supposed to hurt?" A Shocker tries to give the same sad story that he gave everyone, including Peter Parker. Harry knocks him out and takes back his proprietary property. More time moves on. Harry eventually met with Peter after deactivating Peter's suit, forcing him to reveal himself. But there was more to what Harry wanted. He wanted to know from Peter how he felt about his life after finding the suit. He went on to state that he didn't come across his suit the same way that Peter did. Instead, after Stark's involvement with his parents' death, he inherited Oscorp and was given Stark's company along with it. After reading through all of the Stark family secrets, he found out that the people who gave him this company might just be the most evil people in the history of the world. And it is very possible that they, not Tony Stark, are really the ones who had his parents killed. Harry then asks, what did Stark tell him when he found the suit? Peter tells him that he said that he was supposed to be a hero. As soon as he heard those words come out of Tony Stark's mouth, he could feel it in his bones that he was right. So now, the two of them can do something about it to make the world a better place. Now in the current time, Harry finds himself with a man that he's been fighting with, Bullseye. He says that he thought that he was the suit, and after their battle, he learned it was so much more deeper. He had an exoskeleton underneath his skin. And while it was impressive, taking it out must have hurt. Bullseye scoffs in his chair, stating that the pain is part of the process. Do you really have any idea what you're dealing with here? Harry says that he understands there is more to this than what appears to be going on, that there are masters influencing things in the world, and that they have evidence of that. But what he wants is to know everything about it, and he doesn't care how long that's going to take. Lebillan asks, you think the answers are going to help you sleep better at night? Everybody thinks they want to be a hero, until it costs them something, and it always costs you something. We make sure of that. Then we'll see who you really are, what you really are. Harry looks back at his helmet, telling him that his father used to talk about the difference between being a boy and a man, and maybe he was right. Maybe they both are. Is he a boy, or is he a man? Is he a hero, or is he something else? I guess we're just going to have to wait and find out who exactly is the Green Goblin in this story.
Peter walks out of the kitchen and draws looks of shock from his family as they see his face swollen and bruised. What happened to your face? May asks in shock. But Peter waves off their concern as he takes a seat at the table. You know how clumsy I can be sometimes, he says with a smile, wincing at the expression. As MJ goes to get ice, Ben asks his father what happened. I was working late at the Bugle, and the old Parker luck reared its ugly head, Peter says as MJ presses an ice bag onto his bruises. But May can't hold it in any longer. She is quaking with secret knowledge. Oh, Dad being a superhero! She starts to shout before clapping her hands over her mouth. MJ and Ben look in shock as May begins to cry, apologizing to her father for letting their secret slip. Peter, what is May talking about? MJ asks. Peter sighs and finally tells his family the truth, starting with how he got his powers and explaining what happened the night before. Last night, Peter sat on the roof with Harry, watching as Fisk gets out of his car and heads into his luxury apartment building. Harry nods his head and glances at his partner. We'll give the guards time to do their final checks and take up their posts. Then we go in. Are you ready? Harry asks. Peter shrugs. I guess, he answers. Harry looks to him, worried that his new friend is going to back out on their attack on Fisk. But Peter explains that he just feels awkward breaking into a home. I've never broken a law before. Any law. Like, ever. Peter says as he glances at Harry, mildly embarrassed. Harry shrugs. It's a necessary evil, Peter, he says. Peter's head snaps up and he looks at Harry quickly. Don't use my name in costume. Why wear a mask if you're gonna do that? Use a code name or something, Peter says, explaining that the news outlets have been calling Harry the Green Goblin. Harry shakes his head. They don't get to choose my code name. I should, he says. Peter agrees. Okay, so what's your code name? He asks. Harry pauses for a moment and thinks about it. I kind of like Green Goblin, he finally admits. Suddenly, the lights go dark in Fisk's windows, and the two heroes leap into action. Harry flies forward on his glider while Peter shoots a web and swings across the gap. They crash through the skylight and land lightly on the floor. Oh, great. Well, that's destruction of property, Peter sighs. But both heroes are shocked to find Fisk waiting for them by the bar. Ah, company. I'm so surprised. Can't you see how surprised I am? Fisk asks with a smile as he pours himself a drink. He glances at them, explaining that he owns all the buildings surrounding his apartment, and security cameras have been watching the heroes for some time. I was wondering when you were going to invite yourselves in, he says. Harry stalks forward, preparing for a fight and demanding to know who the secret group behind everything is. And how'd you learn something like that? Fisk asks as he sips his drink. Your assassin told me, Harry snaps. Fisk nods and reaches into his pocket, pulling out a remote. Well, it wasn't really my guy. I guess the lesson here is, if you want something done right, do it yourself, he says as he taps a button. Bars suddenly slam down around the room, sealing the two heroes in with Fisk. Peter's spider sense begins to go crazy, and he shouts for his friend to move. But Fisk is fast for a man his size, and he picks up the bar and throws it at Harry, slamming him into the bars. Peter shoots webs into Fisk's eyes to blind him before leaping at him and hitting him hard. What is wrong with you? Without his armor, that would have killed him, he shouts. But Fisk grabs him by the throat and throws him across the room. That's the idea, he growls. But an energy blast from Harry gets Fisk's attention. Playing for keeps is risky, Mr. Fisk. There's still time for you to reconsider, Harry shouts as he tosses a bomb that explodes when it hits Fisk and shreds his suit. When the smoke clears, Fisk stands unharmed. His bare chest is covered in strange tattoos. Normally that would have hurt, but I've recently had some work done, he growls, charging forward and slamming into Harry, bringing him down with several blows and cracking his armor. Fisk stands over him, prepared to make the killing blow. You're all alone. It's over, Fisk gloats, raising his fist. But Peter is there, grabbing a hold of him. Alone? I'm wearing a bright red and blue suit. How do you forget I'm in the room? It kind of hurts my feelings, Peter jokes. But Fisk grabs him and slams him into the floor, his massive fists raining down on Peter again and again. Little help, Peter groans between blows. Harry's glider flies through the air, bombing the wall and throwing Fisk clear. As the smoke clears, Harry grabs a hold of Peter and they stagger through the hole in the wall, jumping on the glider and flying away. Peter sags in Harry's arm, but the goblin holds him steady. Hold on, we're getting out of here, Harry gasps. In the present, Peter finishes his story. And that is the story of how your dad got his butt kicked, he tells his family. Everyone sits in silence for a moment before Ben speaks up. Hold on, isn't that illegal, Dad? He asks. Peter nods and points to his son. Yes, exactly. That's what I've been saying, he says in exasperation. But Peter does explain that Fisk is a bad man who does bad things. May looks at him with worry, asking her father if he has to fight him again. Well, we can't just let him do bad things to good people, Peter tells his daughter. They all stand, with Peter telling his kids that they need to keep all of this a secret. MJ finally ushers them off to bed and explains that the parents need to talk. Left alone, the pair stands awkwardly in silence for a moment. So, I'm afraid to ask, but how mad are you? Peter finally asks. But MJ shakes her head, explaining that she isn't mad, just confused why he didn't tell her. Though, she admits that she is proud of him. He glances at her, catching her staring. You want to see the suit, don't you? He asks with a smile. Oh yes, I most certainly do, she replies. He transforms before her eyes, appearing in his costume. What do you think? he asks. She walks around him, giving him an appraisal once over, her eyes lingering. "Oh, I think this definitely works," she says with a smile, though she admits that he does need a codename. "Yeah, I was thinking about that, but I have no idea," Peter says. MJ looks at him in surprise and points to the spider symbol on his chest. "Isn't it obvious? You're Spider-Man," she tells him. Oscorp Industries. Dr. Otto Octavius rises up on his platform, admiring the Green Goblin armor. "It's a beautiful thing, don't you think?" Otto whispers. Below him, Spider-Man takes a bite of his sandwich. "Sure, I guess," he says with a shrug. Peter glances at Harry, who quickly explains that Otto is one of the smartest men working for Oscorp. Otto nods, turning around and looking at the pair. "This suit is a work of art. Complicated, but elegant. I think I finally have my head wrapped around it," Otto explains. Otto explains that both of their suits are Stark tech, but were built using two different types of engineering. He motions over his shoulder at the Green Goblin armor. "Harry, your suit is a dedicated piece of sophisticated hardware. Top of the line. I'd call it the perfect war machine," Otto says, explaining that they can customize it to the exact type of battle suit that Harry needs. But then he turns to Spider-Man as the hero takes another bite of his sandwich. "But this Picotech of yours, it's beyond that. It's highly adaptable, transformative. It's going to take some more time," Otto says. He steps forward and pokes a needle into Spidey's hand, taking a small sample of the Picotech. Otto places the sample on his desk before turning back to the pair, explaining that both suits work independently but are on the same network. He smiles at them both and looks at his notes. But here's the amazing thing. Both suits have been running in a kind of safe mode. They both have an onboard AI that you can use for combat analytics, life support, even higher function problem solving, Otto tells them. He taps the pad and explains that they just need to map the AI and give them a profile. Think of it like a personality. "I've prepared several archetypes," he says, looking at Spidey, who shrugs. "I like to talk to myself," Spidey says. Otto turns to Harry, who is staring at the armor. Harry turns back, questioning if they have enough data to put his father's personality into the AI. Otto ponders the question for a moment. "It should work," he finally admits. Meanwhile, Ben and Jonah are meeting a mysterious informant in a parking garage. The shadowy figure calls them over, and Jonah arrives in a huff. "Nice ambiance. Very cloak and dagger. Why are we meeting down here?" Jonah demands. Robbie Robertson steps out of the shadows with a smile. "Well, Jonah, I wanted someplace private. This is private," he says. Jonah begins to complain about his back and knees and having to go up and down so many stairs, but Ben cuts him off, asking why Robbie wanted to meet. "What you got for us?" Ben asks. Robbie hands them an envelope, and the two men look through the papers, both getting excited. "Ben, this is," Jonah begins to whisper. Ben nods and looks back at Robbie, wondering why he is giving this information to their fledgling news source. "Both of you know this isn't getting published at the Bugle," Robbie points out. The pair ask why he doesn't leave and come join them. "We just got some money from a rich lady. Why not come and join our cause?" Ben asks. Robbie shakes his head, explaining that he will eventually, but right now, he can act as the inside man at the Bugle. Meanwhile, a hovercraft buzzes over the city. It doesn't show up on any radar and lands on a building that technically doesn't exist. A black hole in the system of New York. The doors open and Bullseye motions to Captain Britain. "The building's locked down and the surrounding area is secure. You've got a 20-minute window, sir," Bullseye says over the drone of the engine. Captain Britain heads inside, finding Wilson Fisk in a lavishly furnished state room. The Kingpin is staring up at a painting of the Maker. "I never met him," Fisk says softly as Captain Britain enters the room. Britain nods as he joins the Kingpin. It's not surprising. I always got the sense that he didn't like the people, he points out. The two get to the point of the visit, with Britain asking what happened to the agent that he sent. The agent that seems to have been lost. I didn't lose him. He just decided to up and disappear, Fisk explains, detailing that all the footage of the attack was lost when the attackers used a localized EMP. A pity, Britain says as he pours himself a drink from the bar. He takes a sip and looks back to Fisk. It seems you were right, and I was wrong. This has grown into a much larger problem than I first believed, Britain says. A hand absently reaching up for the eye he'd recently lost, but he motions to one wall which slides away. But I have a solution. I come bearing gifts, he explains. Fisk turns to the expanded room and regards the squad of bullseyes that stand at attention. An entire team of my agents. I don't have a concrete plan, but there are worse ideas than throwing numbers at it, Britain explains. But Fisk shakes his head, telling the leader of the city that he doesn't need agents. I know my adversaries can be beaten. I know how to do it, and I will do so on my terms, Fisk says. Britain smiles at him. Well, look at you, behaving like the king of his own kingdom, he says as he takes another sip of his drink. And will you offer me a small hint of your plan? He asks. Fisk just smiles. I do not have a plan. I have 6 of them, he says softly. Later, at an Oscorp warehouse, Green Goblin is launched across the room as Spidey hits him in the face. Not gonna lie, I felt that, Harry groaned. Peter offers him a hand up. Sorry about that, he says to his friend. They look back over to Otto, who has set up his computers. Get what you need? Harry calls. Otto nods and hits a few keys, telling the pair that he is ready to activate the AI programs. An energy surge runs through both suits, and Harry and Peter look around in surprise. I'm not sure, Harry begins to say, but the voice of his father cuts him off. All right, son, show me what you're made of, Norman says. Harry nods and glances at Peter. Hey, sorry about this, but my dad says I need to kick your ass, Harry explains. Meanwhile, Peter is hearing his own voice running through the suit, telling him how great a dad he is and how his family is the best. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, Peter jokes. The two launch at each other, with Harry dodging Peter's attacks this time. He reaches out and grabs his arm, pulling him in and cracking him across the jaw. Good, Norman says. But Peter takes the force of the blow and flips through the air, firing a web and pulling himself in to punch Harry hard enough to knock him to the ground. Soft, Norman mutters. Harry fires a laser blast, but Peter dodges around it, swinging in to hit him again. I always wondered just how weak you were, Harry, Norman continues as the pair trade blows back and forth. Son, you're embarrassing me, Norman tells him. Harry lets out a scream of rage and hits Peter with a full blast from his chest cannon. Spidey sails through the air, slamming into a stack of crates. Ow, we okay? He asks himself. The AI immediately chirps up. Yeah, our diagnostics are within acceptable levels. We're fine. But Harry, he needs therapy, Peter's AI says. Harry stands there. His chest is smoking as he breathes heavily. Well, Dad, how was that? He asks. The Norman AI pauses for a moment. Acceptable, it finally admits. Harry crosses the room, helping Spidey to his feet. But Otto suddenly gets worried and begins to work frantically on his computer. Hey, little problem here. Another signal on the Stark network. I tried to lock it out, but there's a back door, he says. Light fills the room as a portal begins to open. It's here! Otto shouts. Harry and Peter drop into fighting stances as something comes through the portal. I told you I'd be back in 6 months, and here I am, Tony Stark says as he steps through in his Iron Lad armor. I just have one question. Are you a hero yet? He asks. August. Peter Parker is standing in his apartment, staring at the black ball that sits on his dresser. MJ pokes her head through the bedroom door. Peter, I think we're gonna be late, she says as she puts on her earrings. Peter shakes out of his daze and looks at her. Hey, you okay? Something wrong? She asks. Peter shakes his head and smiles. Well, I just have a lot on my mind, he tells her. She smiles and kisses him on the cheek before heading out the door, reminding him to get the candles when he picks up the cake. Peter turns back to the ball and holds out his hand. Black tendrils begin to shift off the suit, reaching for him, but Peter pulls his hand away. No, not today. We have a brand new no costume policy at Parker birthday parties, Peter tells the suit as he turns away. Well, that's disappointing, but tell the kids I said happy birthday, his voice calls out from the ball. Peter turns back in shock. How are you talking? He asks. I talk all the time, Peter. I believe we've even had conversations, the ball tells him. But Peter points out that the voice is usually in his head. Yeah, same as now. I'm not actually talking out loud. You're imagining this, the ball says. Peter stares at it for a moment, his eyes widened. Just kidding, the ball continues. Peter smiles and picks up the ball, its tendrils wrapping around him and turning into his costume. What else can you do that I don't know about? Peter asks, staring down at his own reflection in the shiny black material. Oh, I can do all kinds of things, Peter, his reflection says. Peter sighs and puts the ball back on the dresser. I gotta go, but we're gonna talk more about this later, Peter says before walking out of the room. 3 weeks ago, Peter and Harry stand before Iron Lad. Okay, I have a question about my suit, Peter says, raising his hand. Iron Lad looks at him. Oh yeah? That's the first thing you want to ask me about? Tony asks. Peter nods and asks why his suit is so much more advanced than Tony's or Harry's. Tony lands on the ground, his helmet sliding away as he explains that the Picotech was the last thing that his father invented. It's a very special kind of material that Tony hasn't been able to replicate. He felt that something as special as it needed to be used by someone special. Spidey's eyes widened. What do you mean? What makes me so special? He asks. Tony smiles and explains that Peter's name was at the top of the Maker's list. What list? Harry asks. Tony explains to them that the Maker had a database of all the heroes he needed to stop from existing. There's a handful of heroes he deemed mission critical to erase from history. They're the ones who had to go. Top of the list, Tony explains. He glances over at Harry. Who are you supposed to be in that suit of stolen armor? Tony asks. Harry shakes his head. Don't worry about it, he says. But Tony holds out a hand, taking control of Harry's suit and removing his helmet. Harry looks around in surprise as Peter stifles a laugh. See? Not so cool when someone else does it to you, is it? He asks. Tony glares at Harry. I know that face. You're Harry Osborn. You stole my birthright, Tony says. Harry steps forward and glares back. Actually, I paid for it, he says softly. Tony finally turns away and looks to Peter. He puts an armored hand on his shoulder. The Maker returns in a little over a year. Best get ready for him, Tony says as he turns away. But Harry stops him. Where was I? On the list, he asks. Tony shrugs. You weren't on it. At all, he says as his helmet slides back into place. He boosts into the air. But if you're hanging with this guy, I'm sure you'll grow into the suit. So keep it, and the company. I've moved on to bigger things, he says, before flying away. Present day. Peter walks out of the bakery with his children's cake, followed by Uncle Ben and Jonah. Ben coughs a little and finally gets around to asking his nephew the question that he's been sitting on. The paper launches next month, and when it does, we want you on board, Ben says. Peter looks at them both, surprised. As they walk down the street, he points out that he's been working at the Bugle for 10 years, that he has a family to think about and provide for. Are you really going to say no to me? Ben asks with a smile. Peter sighs. You're not making this easy, he says. Jonah nudges his old friend. That's not a no, he says with a smile. Peter finally relents and promises to talk with MJ about it. Well, tell her you're getting a raise, Ben says. Later, they all arrive at the birthday party at Arcades. There, the family has a good time, enjoying each other's company. Most of May's friends are running around, enjoying cake. Even Richard is having a good time, even though he has few friends to hang with. Later that night, at Fisk Tower, Wilson turns to his executive assistant as the sound of a helicopter approaching reaches his ears. Are they all here? Fisk asks. Mr. Wesley nods his head, informing Fisk that the last member of his lieutenants has finally arrived. The door opens to reveal Martin Lee, the CEO of Feast by day and the leader of the Demons Gang by night, who holds control of Queens. Martin Lee is also known as Mr. Negative due to his powers, though the rest of the city is unaware of this. Next is Walter Hardy, also known as Black Cat, who controls the Bronx. He is also followed by Sergei Kravenov, who gloats that neither of the other men could possibly hunt him. After he was exiled from Russia by the mutant rulers, he came to America and now controls Staten Island. The three men greet each other, joking over drinks, but they are interrupted by swirling fog. When the fog clears, it is replaced by Mysterio. Must you do this every time? Lee asks with a sigh. Mysterio shakes his marble head. No, but I do, he says. Fisk steps into the room, motioning everyone into the dining room so they can begin to discuss their plans. Black Cat walks by Fisk. Always up for fun and games, but we're one short, Hardy says. Fisk only smiles. He doesn't use the front door, he says. They head into the study to discover the Mole Man, and a few of his people have already come up through a hole in the fireplace.
Hello, Wilson. Must be something important to bring us all together,
the Mole Man says. Wilson nods and motions for everyone to sit, while Mr. Wesley hands out the folders. Indeed, Fisk says as he sits in his lavish chair. This city is mine, and what is mine I have divided over the years and given a portion to each of you. But now it seems our city has an infestation. Some rats have forgotten their place, Wilson growls. Kravenov looks up from the photos of Spider-Man and Green Goblin. And do you prefer the six of us catch these rats? Or should we kill them? He asks. Fisk smiles a sinister smile at his six. Actually, I was thinking we could make a game of it. September. Ben Parker and J. Jonah Jameson sit in a bar in New York. Neither have a happy look on their face, and Ben motions for another beer. The bartender raises an eyebrow at the two grumpy old men. Can't you tell we're celebrating? Jameson asks as he finishes his beer. The bartender shrugs and pours them more drinks, and the two turn to each other and toast. Shall we drink to our success? Ben asks. Jameson shakes his head. No, to victory and achieving everything we've ever wanted, Jameson sighs. As the two continue to drink, the door opens up and MJ walks in with a big smile. There they are, my two favorite entrepreneurs, she says as she walks over and puts her hand on their shoulders. But neither of the old newsmen look happy. Why the sour looks, gentlemen? Did something happen that I don't know about? She asks. Jameson reaches for his tablet and brings up all their latest stories. all of which have been hits since the paper went public. Each story showcases Spider-Man fighting crime with fantastic pictures. It's our first month of the paper being live, and 8 of our top 10 stories are about Spider-Man, Jameson sighs. Ben nods, chiming in that they want to report real stories that no one else is talking about. But all they've been reporting is sensationalism. MJ smiles. You two aren't getting it, she explains, telling them that with all these stories in Peter's pictures, they are building a fan base with new subscribers every day, and that this is making them untouchable. She leans in. In the next 6 months, the two of you are going to be bigger than the Bugle, she whispers. Jameson smiles for the first time. Oh, I do like the sound of that, he says. She takes Ben's hand. These numbers, what they mean is the devil cannot cast you out. They mean that you can write whatever you want, and the people will see it, she says. Ben and Jonah look at each other and smile, finally in a good mood over their success. Meanwhile, Spider-Man and Green Goblin arrive at Oscorp building, where they find Dr. Octavius waiting for them. As they walk in, Otto is happy to see them, smiling and explaining that he has finally developed freedom for them. Freedom from Stain and Stark, for both of you, he explains. Harry removes his helmet and smiles. Nice. How'd you do it? He asks. Otto taps a few buttons on his computer and brings Harry a new operating system, explaining that he merely had to develop new firmware for Harry's suit, overriding the Stark carrier signal that all Stark tech runs on. But then he frowns and turns to Peter. As for you, Spider-Man, I've had to go a little further outside the box, as your suit remains a hyper-advanced enigma that I can't solve, Otto says. He leads them across the room and reaches for a sheet that is covering something. Therefore, you're going to need a new one, which I have designed myself, he says, preparing to pull the sheet and reveal his creation. But Peter stops him. Give me a second, he says as he turns away. Harry and Otto watch as Peter begins to pace the room, talking to the AI version of himself inside his nanosuit. So what do we think? Peter asks himself. AI Peter doesn't like the idea of sitting on the sidelines, but also isn't a fan of Stark being able to track them. So what do we do with you? Peter whispers. I'll bet you a limitless credit card whose balance gets paid off every month that the good doctor tries to keep me, the AI Peter responds. Peter turns back to Otto, asking what he plans on doing with the Picotech suit. Sinister shadows almost seem to play across Otto's face. I was thinking the best thing we could do would be build some kind of containment cage for it. That seems like the safest choice. Plus, it would give me more time to figure things out. You know, play around with it a little bit, Otto says. Don't you dare leave me with him, AI Peter shouts in Peter's ear. AI Peter suggests that Peter just leave him at home until all things get sorted out. Worst case scenario, I'm the best home defense system you could possibly have, AI Peter says. Finally, Peter agrees and asks Otto to show him the new suit. Otto pulls back the sheet, revealing the Spider Armor Mark I. He smiles as he begins to run through the specs, pointing out that it is bulletproof and armed with a wide assortment of weapons, including upgraded web shooters, guns, and missiles. So, what do you think? Otto asks with a smile. Peter stares at the armor for a moment, but he finally shakes his head. I think I'm good, he tells the doc. Otto seems shocked that Spider-Man wouldn't want this new war suit, but Harry throws an arm around Otto's shoulder, pointing out that the suit might be a little much for Spider-Man, who is more of an agile fighter. Otto begins to nod his head. Yes, it's possible it's a tad over-designed. There is a simpler solution, he says, turning back to Peter. Cool, whatever it is, I'll take it, Peter says. Later, Spider-Man and Green Goblin stand on a rooftop, with Peter tugging at his new suit. I really do like your new suit, Harry offers. Shut up, it's spandex, Peter groans. Harry shakes his head. Otto was very clear about it being a spandex Kevlar composite, he points out. The two continue to talk and joke as friends, with Peter inviting Harry and Gwen to spend Christmas with his family. Suddenly, a strange tingle begins to go off in Peter's head. He suddenly reacts, shouting a warning to Harry before leaping away. "Look out!" Peter shouts, but an electric dart hits Harry in the neck, disabling his armor and dropping him to the ground. Spider-Man whirls as the black cat descends on them. "He better be okay," Spider-Man growls as he drops into a fighting stance. Black Cat shrugs, a smile playing across his lips as he paces across the rooftop, unfurling a whip from around his waist. "I'd worry about myself. You're both in the same boat after all," he says. Spider-Man narrows his eyes at the crime lord. "You know, it's not polite to start a fight without introducing yourself," he quips. Black Cat nods and prepares himself. His muscles are tightening, ready to fight. "I am the shadow in the night, a whisper of a dream. My enemies call me the Black Cat," the man says. He moves quickly, lashing out with the whip and cracking it against Spider-Man's chest, tearing through his new suit and cutting into his skin. The whip comes back and lashes out again, but Spider-Man is ready this time, leaping and flipping over the attack. But the whip slashes through the support struts of a water tower, bringing it crashing down on Spidey. The hero rolls away as the water pours over him, and Black Cat stalks forward, rolling up his whip and wrapping it around the hero's throat. He pulls it tight, cutting off Spidey's airflow. "The Kingpin of New York has called together all its captains to play the great game. You and the Goblin, you are both prey and prize," Black Cat hisses. Peter gasps behind his mask, struggling for air. "Your lives are forfeit," Black Cat says with a smile. Peter continues to gasp and struggle. "And what do you get?" he demands. Black Cat shakes his head. "That is none of your business," he hisses. But Peter grabs him by the arms, twisting himself free and throwing the criminal away. "Well, I guess that gives me something to live for," he jokes as he shoots webs to pin Black Cat to the roof. Black Cat struggles for a moment before giving up. He slumps into the webbing. "I suppose living is for the young, and I am an old man. This day has been coming for some time. Go ahead, get it over with," he says. But Spidey doesn't know what he's talking about. "You are going to kill me now, aren't you?" Black Cat asks. Spidey stares at him for a moment before shaking his head. "Of course not. Don't be ridiculous," he says. Spidey turns back to Green Goblin, tapping his friend on the helmet. "Hey, are you okay in there?" he asks. But he doesn't see Black Cat behind him, pulling out an energy blade and cutting through the webbing. The villain stalks forward, prepared to take Spider-Man's life. But at that moment, Green Goblin's armor reboots. "Look out!" Harry shouts, pushing Peter out of the way and firing a blast into Black Cat's chest, sending him over the edge of the building. The old criminal screams as he plummets towards the pavement below. Spidey and Goblin rush to the edge of the roof and stare down at the fallen foe, but they see him twitch. "He's still moving. Call an ambulance," Spidey tells his friend. Minutes later, they watch as the EMTs put the Black Cat in the back of an ambulance. Peter pulls off his mask and whirls on his friend, demanding to know what he was thinking by shooting the criminal off the roof. "What do you mean? My suit just came back online and you had your back on him. He had a weapon. I did what I had to do," Harry snaps back at him. The two argue, but Harry explains to Peter that he would do whatever he had to protect his friends and family. But Peter shakes his head. "We can't be like them. We're supposed to be heroes. We're supposed to be better than them," Peter tells him. Peter finally smiles. "Well, just so you know, you're still invited to Christmas," he says. Harry smiles and throws an arm around Peter's shoulder. "I'll get the kids something cool. I'm thinking something spandex," Harry says as they walk away, and Peter sighs. "Harry, you just might be the worst best friend a guy could have," he jokes. October. A chill has settled over New York City, but Ben Parker meets Jonah at the car with a smile and a coffee. But Jonah is a grumpy man in the morning and gets in the car. Ben explains to him that there might be a break in the story they're writing as they begin to drive through the city. They arrive at a country club on Long Island, where they slip inside and find Mr. Wesley, Wilson Fisk's lawyer, eating his lunch and going over paperwork. "Mind if we sit?" Ben asks. Wesley looks at them in surprise and explains that he normally eats alone, but Jonah pulls out a chair and sits down with a big smile. "That's okay, we don't have long and I assume the service here is a little slow," Jonah says. Wesley shrugs. "Actually, the service along with the food is excellent. I do suppose the security could be better," he points out. Ben introduces the two and explains to the lawyer that they are writing a story and were hoping that he could help them. He puts down a folder, opening it to reveal paperwork that shows the Stark Stain Company was sold for an amount of money that was authorized by Fisk. This paperwork shows the authorization of the sale to an offshore company that's owned by another offshore company, and so on, Ben points out. He would like to know who the true buyer was, pointing out that he will find out eventually, but was hoping that Wesley would save him the time and effort. Wesley adjusts his glasses and shakes his head. "If that's what you're really looking for, then you need to look somewhere else," he says. He glances over the reporter's shoulders as the club security finally arrives and escorts the two gentlemen out. 1 week later, Ben and Jonah are continuing the work, running down the real buyer behind the purchase of Stark Stain. Finally, Ben has figured it out, and Jonah pins a piece of paper on the board, taping the name Oscorp. 1 week after that, the pair find themselves at the headquarters of Oscorp Industries, where they meet with Gwen Osborne, wife of Harry Osborne and financial benefactor of the paper. "Ah, if it isn't my two favorite reporters on planet Earth," Gwen says with a smile from behind her desk, motioning for the reporters to sit. They quickly exchange pleasantries and get straight to the point, with Ben pulling out a tape recorder and beginning to ask his questions. "Who arranged the sale? Why are you working so hard to hide the fact that you own Stark Stain? What happened to all Stark's technology? And why do all these things coincide with people suddenly flying through the air in armored suits?" Ben asks. Gwen stares at them for a moment. "Care to comment?" Jonah asks. She finally nods. "Sure," she says softly. "I want my damn money back," she finally snaps at them. 2 days later, Harry Osborne stands outside the doors to the paper's office. He knocks and is greeted by both Ben and Jonah. Harry asks them what it would take for them to not print the story about Oscorp, but Ben shakes his head, explaining that they aren't writing a story on Oscorp, that they are merely trying to figure out why Osborne bought Stark Stain, a sale that was authorized by Fisk, and then immediately, a new armored hero was spotted flying around the city. "What we think is that Oscorp took existing Iron Man tech, put a new coat of paint on it, and shined it up real nice," Ben explains. "Here's our real question. We know Fisk enabled the sale of the company to Oscorp, and we also know that you and your spider friend have been waging a two-person war on the Fisk Empire. So, why would Fisk sell you the thing that you're using to destroy him?" they ask. Harry finally admits that when they purchased the company, they found the truth buried in Stark's mainframe about the secret group that was running the world, the group that actually controls Fisk. He holds up a thumb drive and offers it to the reporters. "This is the real story. They're the ones who did it all. They killed my parents, and they killed your wife," Harry says to Ben. He hands them the drive and tells them to be careful. "These people are dangerous and ruthless. You have friends and family. There's a reason I wear a mask. I wouldn't put my name anywhere near this story," Harry tells them, but Ben and Jonah smile at each other. "Who said we were?" Ben says. Later that night, Jonah has finished writing the article. Ben reads it over his shoulder and nods with approval. They both stare at the screen, the headline asking, "Who really controls Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin of New York?" The story is the first story by the paper's elusive reporter, Ben Reilly. Spider-Man sighs as he looks down on the city and hangs up his phone. Still no word from Harry, who was supposed to meet him 2 hours ago. He keeps his eyes on the bank he's staking out as he taps another number into his phone. Desperate times, I suppose, he whispers to himself. The phone rings for a second before someone answers. Hello, this is Otto Octavius. Who's calling? Otto asks. Peter pauses for a moment. This is Spider-Man. I'm sure you're busy, but have you seen Harry? Spidey asks. Otto taps more buttons on his lab computers, pointing out to the hero that he isn't Harry's babysitter. Could you track the suit for me? Spidey asks. Otto sighs again. You're not gonna leave me alone until I do, are you? He asks. Nope, Peter tells him cheerfully. It takes only a moment for Otto to track the suit's signal, but before he can tell Spider-Man, the hero has to hang up the phone, because below him, 2 vans have pulled up to the bank, and masked criminals jump out and rush inside. Well, Harry, of all the stakeouts to stand me up on, it just so happens to be one where some real crime ensues, Spidey says as he leaps into the air and swings into action. He crashes through the front window of the bank, slamming into one of the inner demons and bringing him to the floor. Hey guys, sorry to interrupt your little escapades here. And sure, everyone has a problem with banks these days, but are guns really the answer? Spidey quips. The inner demons raise their guns and prepare to fire, but Spider-Man holds up his hands. Look, I know transaction fees are out of control, and God forbid you try and cash a check or withdraw money, but bank robberies never go well. So let's just put the weapons down and let these nice people go, Spidey says as he motions to the hostages on the floor. A red-headed woman sits up and glares at Spidey. Why don't you shut up? You're going to get everyone killed, she shouts. Spidey looks at her in shock before turning back to the inner demons. Okay, fine. You can keep her, but everyone else goes free, he suggests. The demons suddenly open fire, but Spidey is already on the move, leaping in the air and shooting his webs, knocking the guns away. 2 of the demons rush at him with energy swords, but he ducks and flips over their attacks, disarming them fast and bringing them down. Wow, are you guys terrible at fighting, or am I just getting way better at this? Spidey questions. But he turns to find another demon holding a gun to the red-headed woman. See? You idiot! I told you this was gonna happen! She shouts. The criminal pokes her with the pistol. Quiet! Either we leave with the money, Spider-Man, or she gets one in the head, the demon snaps. But Spidey shakes his head. While tempting, that totally goes against my save everyone no matter what ethos, Spidey says. He flips through the air and fires some more webs, stopping the goon from firing and the woman from talking. Spider-Man lands, admiring his handiwork, but someone calls out to him. It appears you've made short work of my men. I suppose that counts for something. Mr. Negative says as he walks out of the vault with more demons. Spider-Man looks him up and down. Whoa, look at you rocking the man bun. Bold choice. People are gonna love you in jail, Spidey notes to the superpowered criminal. Mr. Negative nods his head and walks towards Spider-Man calmly. You think you're the man to put me there? He asks. He looks around thoughtfully. And where is your green friend today? He asks. Afraid I'm flying solo on this one, Spidey notes. Mr. Negative smiles. The world seems to glow around him. It's a tough life being alone. Me? I never am, he says softly. Suddenly, hands are reaching for Spider-Man. He turns in shock to find the hostages have rushed at him, their eyes glowing with dark energy. Stop! I'm on your side! He shouts. He doesn't want to hurt them, and the civilians are beginning to tear at his costume, kicking and punching him. Mr. Negative turns away, walking out of the bank with his gang. These people work for me now, doing the good work of stopping men like you. Negative calls over his shoulder. Later, Peter struggles through the window of his apartment and collapses onto the floor, his suit torn and his skin covered in scratches. He groans in the dark before sensing that he isn't alone. Opening one eye, he sees Mary Jane watching him from the couch. "Hey there," he says softly. She cocks an eyebrow at him. "Hey yourself, Tiger. Having a bad day at work?" she asks. Peter groans as he sits up, explaining to her about what happened, how he refused to fight back and hurt those innocent people. Mary Jane nods as she looks at her husband, explaining that she thinks she's been very understanding about all of this. "So, what should I do if I'm starting to freak out a little bit?" she asks. Peter looks down at his scratched up body. "Because of this?" he asks in surprise. He looks at his wife, telling her that he understands, but that he is doing what he is supposed to do. "Do you promise to tell me when I should get scared?" she asks softly. Peter nods his head in the dark. "Baby, if I ever come home and tell you it's time to run, be ready to run. But until then, please don't worry," he says as he hugs her, and they hold each other in the dark. Elsewhere in the city, Mr. Negative pours himself a drink, undisturbed by the Kingpin's glare. "Do I understand you correctly? You had him, and you let him go?" he asks. "No, Kingpin. It was a stalemate. It took him less than a minute to defeat almost all of my men. So I took the liberty the rabble gave me and withdrew from the conflict," Mr. Negative says with a shrug as he sips his drink. Mole Man looks at him, questioning why Mr. Negative didn't merely take control of Spider-Man. "I can judge at a glance, Mole Man. As one measures determination, the Spider would do well in comparison to everyone in this room," he admits. Craven nods, pointing out that the Spider needs to die for what he did to Black Cat, and reducing the Six's number to 5. "No, I have not surrendered my seat," Walter Hardy tells him as he wheels into view, now paralyzed from the waist down. "Yes, I have my limitations, but when needed, my daughter Felicia will stand in my place," Walter says, motioning to his daughter who stands nearby. But Kingpin bangs his fist against the desk, gaining everyone's attention. He has become agitated with his Sinister Six. "Whatever distractions, plans, or agendas you might currently have, stop them all, now. My kingdom is in rebellion, and I will not be pleased until their bodies are laid before me," he growls to the group. Meanwhile, darkness has fallen, and Peter meets his uncle at the memorial for the city. His phone buzzes as he draws close, and he looks down at a message from Harry saying that he'll meet him soon. Peter stops at the memorial and greets his uncle. He places flowers underneath, meant for Aunt May. "Hey, are you sure you don't want to come tomorrow? That's the official date. Everyone will be here. Even the mayor will speak," Peter says. But Ben shakes his head. "I'm not for the show, kiddo," he says. The two exchange memories of Aunt May for a moment before Ben turns to look at Peter. "She'd love what you're doing," he says softly. Peter smiles and nods. "Yeah, she always liked my photos," he says. But Ben shakes his head. "That's not what I'm talking about," he tells Peter. Peter stares at him for a moment as the thought sinks in. He doesn't try to argue and just nods. Ben smiles and looks back at the memorial. "It took me about a week after we figured out who Harry was," he admits. He asks Peter how many people know and tells him that he needs to keep this a secret from everyone else. "Do not tell anyone else. Keeping this secret could save your life, your lives. You have to try harder, Peter," Ben tells him. Peter's phone buzzes again with a message from Harry. "I gotta go," Peter tells Ben, who nods sagely. "Sure, go do some good, kiddo," Ben says with a smile. Peter leaves him there, staring at the memorial for the people lost in the attack. The attack that was blamed on Tony Stark. But Peter and Ben know the truth. New York City, December. Snow falls from a dark sky for a city lit by the joy of Christmas. The doorbell rings at the Parker residence, and Richard Parker opens the door to find Uncle Ben and Jonah waiting for him. "Hey kiddo, hope we're not late," Ben says with a smile. Richard motions them inside, and Jonah is shocked to find everyone wearing a Christmas sweater. Ben nudges him. "Just like I said, Christmas sweaters are a requirement for friends and family," Ben whispers to him. But Jonah reaches up and adjusts the Santa hat that he is wearing. "Enough! I'm wearing the hat. This is about as friendly as I get," he whispers back. Ben looks around the full apartment, shocked to see everyone. Richard nods and motions to Great Aunt Anna, who comes every year, but he points to Aunt Gail, who his mom hasn't spoken to in years. "So, that's a good thing, right?" Ben asks. Richard shrugs and smiles. "I don't know, Uncle Ben. I'm just a poor, simple teenager. Way out of my depth when it comes to things like complex adult situations," Richard says. Suddenly, there's a commotion from the kitchen. "Mom, please don't touch anything! I've got it under control!" MJ shouts. Richard motions towards the kitchen. "Speaking of, Grandma's back from one of her trips," he says. Jonah seems confused. "Grandma?" he whispers. "Madeline Watson, world traveler, 3-time widow, occasional mother," Ben whispers back at him. In the kitchen, Madeline stands next to her daughter and motions to the several plates of food on the counter. "I'm just saying, Mary Jane, this is a lot, but if you don't want my help," she says with a shrug. But Mary Jane just waves her off, though she admits that she might have overdone it with the amount of food that they have. But May is tugging on her sweater. "Hey Mom, can I play games on your phone?" she asks. MJ nods and hands over the device. "Just let me know if someone calls, all right?" Mary Jane says as she sighs and stands. "I meant it's a lot of work for someone who doesn't cook." "Won't cook, can't cook, whichever it is," Madeline says. But MJ shakes her head, explaining that the food is catered and she just has to heat it up. While the two continue to talk in the kitchen, Madeline's eyes wander to where Uncle Ben and Jonah are talking. "How's Ben Parker doing? After everything that's happened, is he seeing anyone?" she asks. MJ is shocked at her mother, but Madeline shrugs and explains that everyone moves on in time. Meanwhile, May is playing on the phone and getting frustrated. Aunt Gail is suddenly over her shoulder, asking if the little girl remembers her. "Yeah, your mom's sister. I've seen lots of pictures," May tells her. "But you don't actually remember me, do you?" Gail points out. But MJ is there, reminding her sister that she hasn't shown up since May was 2. "So don't act like it's on her that she doesn't remember you," MJ says. The two women step away from May, who continues to play her game, and MJ asks her sister why she finally came to a family gathering. "Why show up after all this time?" MJ asks. Gail shrugs. "You can't just be happy to see me?" she asks. MJ nods. "I am happy to see you, if you can finally apologize for what you did," she says. But Gail shakes her head and tells her sister that she doesn't know what MJ is talking about. "Oh, you don't know? You don't think telling me that I was wasting my life because I married the wrong guy, and then saying that having kids was making all of those mistakes permanent isn't something you need to apologize for?" MJ demands, raising her voice in anger and gaining everyone's attention. Gail pauses for a moment. "I just thought you could do better," she says softly. The party continues on, with Ben talking to Aunt Anna and Madeline. "I hope those two can work things out," he says as he motions to the girls. Anna nods sadly. "Me too, because she needs it. Gail's getting divorced," Anna admits, explaining that Gail hasn't told many people. "Oof, divorce, never fun," Madeline admits, looking to her daughters. In the kitchen, MJ is venting to Peter, who is nodding along with everything that she says. MJ keeps talking, not even waiting for Peter to offer any words of encouragement or understanding. Finally, after venting, MJ nods her head. "I don't want it to be this way. I have to hope for something better, right?" MJ asks, turning back to her husband. Peter smiles at her. "Yeah, of course. Thanks, you're the best," she tells him as she hugs him and kisses him on the cheek. She heads back out into the living room and grabs Gail by the hand, leading her to the kitchen. "I want to be clear about something. I love you, but this nonsense between us has to stop. I want it to stop, but you have to meet me halfway," MJ says, asking why Gale finally showed up after all these years. Gale sighs and looks away. I found out Douglas was having an affair. I'm getting divorced. Gale says, explaining that not only has it been going on for years, but that several of her friends knew about it and didn't tell her. May comes over to MJ to tell her that Gwen is calling, but MJ waves her away, telling her to just let it go to voicemail, and she turns back to her sister. So you need support? Someone to talk to? MJ asks, but Gale shakes her head. She tells MJ that she came because she wanted to feel better, hoping that MJ's boring life would make her happy, but she shakes her head, explaining that MJ seems so happy that Gale wishes that she could have something like that. Finally, Gale apologizes for all the things that she said years ago, and MJ smiles and hugs her sister. I forgive you, but don't do it again, she whispers. And so the night continues on, with everyone happy and celebrating, and Peter smiling silently from the kitchen. But the phone buzzes again, and May rushes over to her mother. "Mom, Gwen's calling again," she shouts. MJ finally takes the phone and steps into the bedroom. "Hello, Gwen?" she asks. Gwen's voice is filled with fear and confusion as she begins to speak. "Oh God, why haven't you been picking up? I'm losing my mind here. Is Peter there? Does he know where Harry is?" Gwen asks quickly. She explains that they are at their mountain house for the holidays, and Harry never arrived. It's been 6 days since she heard from him. "Does Peter have any idea where he is?" Gwen asks. MJ turns around to find Peter standing silently behind her. "Peter, did you hear what Gwen was saying? Do you know where Harry is?" she asks, reaching a hand out to her husband. But Peter is no longer solid. His skin and clothes are made of the goo that his suit is created from. "Oh my God, you're not Peter," MJ whispers as the black goo comes away with her hands. "Where is he? What did you do?" MJ asks. Peter turns around and looks at her, a smile on his face, the pure black of his eyes staring at her. "Merry Christmas," he whispers.
And that was volumes 1 and 2 of Ultimate Spider-Man by Jonathan Hickman. This is a series that we've continued on the main channel, so if you enjoyed this, be sure to go watch the next episode. But let me know what you thought down below, and like and subscribe to help the channel out. I'm Dan with Comicstorian, and we will see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.